Tonight I thought we would look at something quite curly and swirly. I feel that last week was quite angular and you know that's fine. It was lovely and we enjoyed that. But I think we'll go back. We'll look at something quite swirly tonight. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you kind of how to start. How I would sort of map out a whole page of design, but then I'm going to focus in on a section to sort of do the full colour. So when I'm doing sort of like swirl designs, I'm going to start off again as I always seem to do. I've got a 0.3 pen, so something not massive but something sort of not the smallest, sort of 2, 3 or 4, something like that. I sort of like to draw, we have done in the past, we've drawn like a sort of spine of a sort of a shape in, and then we've built a doodle coming off that shape. So this is what we're going to do to start off with, is kind of to when you want to design a page or a piece of doodle art, is to get a structure in place first and then to go back and sort of add and build onto that sort of structure. So I'm going to choose like a centre point. You can put your centre point or your design sort of nexus or birth point wherever you like. I'm going to do one sort of, I'm going to sort of start roughly around here, and to begin with I'm just going to put some spirals in, and these we're going to work up later. So what we want to do is imagine that they are like the spines of feathers, like the sort of backs of feathers or something that we can add on to. So it's quite useful this because it gives you a way of plotting the sort of rhythm and the pattern of a design, and then you can go back in and sort of put your detail in. So I've got some sort of 2 starting up here, and then I'm going to have another one coming down and kind of around into the sort of coming into that direction. I'm going to take a smaller one, sort of a shorter one maybe coming in here. I'm trying to think of it sort of like almost like arranging flowers or creating like a sort of something for a hat or something, or a piece of jewellery. I don't know why I think of that, but you know, it sort of has that. I'm thinking of it all coming to a nice sort of clustering point sort of around about here. And then we're going to take one coming off around, and think about these moments where the spirals kind of come and face each other, because you get nice moments like this where they're sort of almost looking at each other. And then I'm going to take a big one coming down into this space here. Now you can branch out and do all sorts of outlines and profiles as you go, so they can all be different and you can add more in, and but we're going to just hopefully create a sort of nice cluster. And then I've got another line that's going to come down here. I think I'm going to bring another one kind of coming out here. And one of the things I want to do in this design is to make good use of quite dark backgrounds, sort of areas of black in the design, to contrast against some lovely sort of pastel colours, because I think it gives it sort of quite a lot of energy and sort of power. So I've got my basic sort of spirals in. Looking at it, I might just do like a little half curl then coming in to fit in some around some of these other places, and we'll see, there may be some more that need to develop, but we'll kind of play that by ear I think as we go. So where I've got my basic sort of spirals, I'm going to start sort of looking at this section here. So I'm going to move, or sort of around about here, I'm going to move in a little bit closer. So we've got like the big picture now, as in the sort of overall shape of our design. So I can come in a little bit closer and we can just see some of the smaller things here. So we've got a nice spiral here. So the first thing I'm going to do is double this one up and make it sort of a bit chunkier. So I'm just going to take a second line just following the first one, just giving myself a little bit. Remember last week we looked at sort of creating an edge or sort of strip that we could work with, so we're going to do, it's a similar kind of idea here, just following this round, and if you need to at the end you can just make it go a little bit fatter and chunky. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be sort of giving us somewhere else that we can work to. So I'm just going to move that up a bit because it was a bit cutting off the bottom. And then when I've got a line like this, we can get some lovely shapes in that kind of use this as a sort of basis to grow from. So we're going to use a teardrop shape. So again, the first one's going to start in just from this centre point, just where all the other ones are growing out of. So I'm going to start with a lovely teardrop with a bit of a curl, like a sort of feather bloom coming out like that. And then the next one can kind of slightly curl round it. So I sort of start the curl up here and then again tuck that away so it disappears down into that part. So we're starting to sort of build up a layer again. And then the next one again, sort of round nose of it here, and then tuck its tail in, sort of like big commas, or sometimes I think of them as tadpoles. You know, it's just, I don't know why, but that's probably not very romantic, but I quite like tadpoles. They're quite jolly little chaps, aren't they, tadpoles? So then another one kind of coming round and tucking in again, and then as we get to the top, the biggest one can sort of come in and join into that sort of spiral, and then we've got a nice progression of sort of curly shapes coming in, and there we sort of coming round, and then we've got for the next side, I'm going to start again underneath here and bring that one in, and again, just, you know, whatever shape happens will be fine. They're all going to tuck round in some sort of way, filling into that shape. They don't have to be perfect. They just want to have those nice sort of round shapes that we've used before, and maybe the last one you just see a little bit of sticking up in the side. So however you can fit them in is going to be fine. That's given us a kind of space to kind of work from. You know, we're going to add lots more into this. There's going to be loads happening, but we're just going to build it up slowly, bit by bit. Then I think with this one here, we'll do a similar. We're going to kind of do the same stage on each part and sort of build it up. If you were doing like the whole thing, you might want to go and like do the same stage on every single curl and every single bit, so that you've got a good memory of what you did, so you don't get to forget it really. But I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to double up this spiral curl here. So I can't draw that without sort of masking it with my hands, but I'm just going to draw the same shape in again. So if I do it relatively quickly, you can see what I'm doing, and then when I move my hand away, you should see it also. It's just making that into a fatter double edge like that, just like we did up here, but just same. And then the same with this one. I'm going to do the same on this one. So it's just so that, you know, we've got the same kind of basis going on for all of them. And so I'm just going to just whiz around this one up here. Again, I'm sorry if you can't see it. And feel free, you know, as I said, change the shapes to suit you the way you want to draw. You don't have to do the same you know, if you find it easier to curl your curls the other way, do them the other way. You know, I've got them all going basically the same way, but whichever way works best for you is going to be fine. So I want to add some detail into this one here. So I think what I'm going to do is, do you want to mute if you've a microphone so that we don't get too much background noise, if that's okay? So I'm going to put a second curl in. So again, that's just going to come round, so it's like tucking inside the first one like that, and that's going to start giving us areas we can explore and sort of draw later. And then again, I can make that into a double kind of spiral. Mine's gone a bit wobbly, I don't mind. If it goes a bit thin or a bit thick, we'll just go with it and see what that gives us. So now I've got another spiral coming in there, and I can use this a bit like the sort of the spine that we use for this one. I'm going to put 3 of my long teardrop shapes in. So I can bring my pen along there and then curl it round and turn it into a teardrop, and another teardrop that's slightly smaller, and another one just coming down into that point. So there we've introduced some of those nice sort of big curl shapes that we had up here. That's coming in sort of round there. And then I think let's see if we can get some more kind of coming in, maybe round here. Let's see if we can fit some. Yeah, I think we can fit. I can fit. And again, it really doesn't matter if you're not doing exactly the same as me at all. So I'm just going to put, and if you want to get one in and it's kind of like, you can't work out, you know, it's going to be quite a short shape. If you just kind of imagine that it's overlapping, and then sort of tuck it down behind, as it were, so it looks like it's sort of tucking in behind the ones in front, and then you can sort of get that full sort of row of ones in without it being that disappearing too much. So we've done this one. So we've got one coming up this way, haven't we? So I'm going to turn this into a lovely big curlicue, just like this, but really full on kind of feathery. So I'm going to start with 3 small teardrop blooms. So let's do the first one just again with its tail going into that point there, and the next one, and this one I want it to curl just a little bit round the one in front like that. So that's sort of coming like that, and then we can do another one. Again, however it's going to fit in, that's fine. Just let it curl over, so they're kind of like, imagine them all sort of nestling up together, kind of nesting around. And then this next one, I'm going to make it really curl round. Okay, so I'm just going to bring it round, and then see how it's going to curl right round that one in front. So it's sort of got that, so it's really sort of tucked in and snuggled in to the sort of like it's starting to be, and it's starting to have quite a nice spirally kind of feel with that kind of tucky in bit. So I'm going to continue. Next one, I'm going to pull them really round so that all their sort of fat noses, as it were, are almost coming round to touch this spiral we've got here, just to really exaggerate that shape. So I'm going to bring, here he comes round and just tuck. That's it. So his nose is coming right down like that. So we're just pulling, imagine that shape sort of pulling and being exaggerated. Again, I'm going to go all the way around with this one and bring that into there. And then I think we'll do one more so we can see where this line's coming. Well, I've got a little bit of line left here. If you haven't, don't worry, just add another one in if you want to. And then, so I can just continue that line and bring it all the way round. And look, it's going to get bigger and it's just going to tuck in behind that. And that's given that a really nice sort of quite exuberant, this is very, I feel this is very sort of, drag queen, very campy kind of. It's going to be eventually, it's going to be really sort of very, very glamorous, sort of like somehow the spirals are really glam, aren't they? And sort of very sort of theatrical. Theatrical is a great word for it. So now we've got some more sort of, we've got some space sort of in between some of these shapes here, so we can add, we've got a sort of nice spiral shape in here, so we can add some detail into that. I think, remember, we're going to be using some black background. What I'm going to do is do a little bit and show you how that looks. Don't feel that you have to colour it all in, as it were, dark live, because I know it can be quite tricky to use thicker pens when you're also focusing on what I'm trying to do. But I'm going to show you where the sort of darker bits come in, so we can sort of play with that. But I'm going to add a little extra spiral onto this one. And I'm thinking, if you're ever a fan of the sort of Tim Burton movies, he loves to have everything in stripes. So I think we're going to have a fair bit of stripes, black and white stripes in this. So remember, previously we've used lines to help show some form. So I'm doing stripes on this one, but I'm giving them a little half moon curve, like a bracket, a punctuation mark kind of bracket, so that this sort of little sinuous part that's tucking around here, that's going to have black and coloured stripes on it in nice thick bands going round. And by using that half moon like we've done before, but that just gives that some form, it gives it a bit of shape, and we're going to continue using that. And then I'm going to do some circles coming round inside. I've got a nice sort of long gap coming in here. Remember, the trick with the circles, making them sort of work with the pattern, is to fit them into the space you've got. So when you're starting off here, you've got little tiny ones that are just like little tiny pearls just appearing inside that sort of space there. Let me come a bit closer if my camera will still stay in focus. There we go. It's a bit slightly wonky, but it's at least a little bit better and a bit closer. And then as this space gets wider, my circles get wider just to fit into it. And then you'll find that they've got a nice rhythm, and they kind of pick up on the rhythm of the shapes around them by doing that. So it's always great. If you're never sure what to put in a space, a little circle with a highlight on it always works wonders. So, and they're not perfect circles. I'm not drawing. They're more like, think of them more like peas in a pod. If you're a sort of person that loves perfect circles, you could get one of those stencil sets you used to get in geometry, with the sort of little circles cut into them, and do them absolutely perfectly. As you can probably tell, I am not that sort of person, so I'm just doing them freehand, and they are not perfect circles, but I'm not letting it worry me. So there we've got a nice row of circles kind of coming out inside that. So they're all following the shapes of this spiral that we've got going on here. So we've got more spirals here. Look, we've got these spirals here, so we could add some more rows into this one, I think, next maybe. So let's do our stripy. I'm going to call it a Tim Burton stripy, and see if from now on. So I'm going to bring this one round, and it's not going to go all the way. Look, it's going to tuck in slightly less, so it's just sort of tucking inside that spiral, and then I can put and they're going to be quite small here, but I'm going to put my stripes in again, so that they're always a half moon shape. And if you have them going always in the same direction, then it will help to make that look like it's a sort of a tube or something with a 3D feel to it. And eventually we're going to colour that, and we're going to use some highlights and some colouring to help add the effect of it being 3D. What I'm going to do with this one is kind of focus in on this area. This I'm not going to do anything on, but hopefully you can see that once you've worked out how we can build on this section, all these ideas will send you whooshing down all these spirals and adding all extra bits in when you've got your own time. And then I can get some circles in here. We could do some quite big ones. They can be quite sort of chunky and delicious. And again, my space changes in size here. So down here they might be relatively small, but straight as they come up into that spiral space, that they're going to get bigger and bigger, and they're going to start filling up that space with nice big circles. If you get one that looks a bit small, just try putting a couple of ones in around the side and kind of, just sort of blend them in like that. They don't have to be, you can decide, like I've done one there. Do I want to continue them round up here? Maybe I can do like a small one in there. We can play with these sort of rules. You haven't got to stick rigidly to these sort of ideas. Maybe something else needs to happen in here. So maybe I'll do just another bit of something curling round, just to sort of increase that shape there, because I've done two little teardrops and a circle kind of just tucked in. But you might have an odd little space like that at the top which you can fill something in. You might feel that we need to do something in here, you might not. I think I want to put one in there. I don't know why, but that just feels more satisfying. So I'm going to do that. And this, I think, eventually, this bit here, I'm kind of round here, we're going to do quite dark, quite black, to get this really vibrant contrast between the sort of two shapes. So I think now we need to look at this space in here. And so I'm going to do my teardrops. Again, we're basically using a sort of a quite not restricted, but a sort of the same kind of shapes over and over again, which will give the whole piece a unity while still having lots of fun with it. So I'm going to bring my feather shape in again. So again, start off with one teardrop and then bring others. I'm not going to curl them round maybe as much this time, just long teardrops coming in like that, so they're just starting to spray out that way. And then I think we're going to bring them out here. So these ones under here are going to stay. Sorry, my hand's going to be let me try and do it from this side so I'm not too masking. That one can come in sort of round like that, and then I can scoot off, look into space again. So this one's going to be curly, and this one's going to curl round the one before. Look, you see it's sort of like echoing the shape of the one below, and then whiz that one round. And I can't get any more in because otherwise I'd run out of paper, but that's just sort of got that in. And I think I want something in here, so a nice fat teardrop shape just to finish off that kind of. And they've got this lovely sort of plume, kind of very, very sort of showgirl headdress kind of feel going on here. Then this spiral here, I think we need to get something happening inside here. So again, I'm going to double it up again. So take my line round, and I'm just following what's already here as much as I can, not in any way perfectly, but just to sort of get that extra sort of feel. And I think I'm going to do another one of those. Let's do another huge one just to make this one slightly different. I'm going to put a curl in first, like I'm just going to do a teardrop, but then I'm just going to twiddle it round and bring it down, so I've got like a triple layer kind of effect, like on that one, like imagine that sort of like stripy toothpaste, that kind of feel, isn't it? So one of these needs to be our Tim Burton stripes, so I'm going to choose the middle one, I think, here. So again, Tim Burton stripes all the way round and down. There's something slightly weirdly Halloweeny about that. I don't know why. I think I'm thinking of all those girls wearing stripy tights in the witches' costumes. They always seem to draw them with stripy tights, don't they? Whether that's from the Wizard of Oz. I think the Wicked Witch who gets squashed by the house has stripy tights. Maybe that's where it comes from. So I'm just going to bring that all the way down so it's disappearing into that point. And then we'll think of some more pattern for that one. And let's do a little one, and let's do a little pattern. This one here, look, let's go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a sort of half moon shape, and I'm going to follow the outline that I've got here. And then when we put the black background in, you'll see the shapes will kind of disappear into it a bit. It'll make more sense when we get there. So what I'm going to do now is just like that petal shape, and the petal shape is coming to fill that space. You see, like, it's almost like what I call the dinosaur bump. It's just like a half moon but slightly longer, and I think of it as like another way drawing kids colouring books, dinosaurs or dragons have those sort of bumps along the back. So I'm just doing a row of those first, and they're going in between the two lines that I've drawn. And again, as the space gets smaller, the bumps get smaller and they fit into the space that's there. And why this is quite useful is that later when we draw black, we're going to like take out the top of this line because it will disappear into the black background, and then these half moon shapes will be left, and they will look as if you've very carefully planned exactly the shape and the size and got them perfectly together, when of course we've just been following these lines almost like guidelines. And then inside each of them I'm going to do a second one, so it's like a little loop or a half loop, or I suppose just giving it a second outline as it goes round. And eventually, see, we're going to colour that inside black and this black and this black and this black, and then they'll suddenly be sticking out just as coloured sort of loops, perfectly graded in the right size, following your spiral down, and it'll look really skillful. So I'm just going to come round and do these last few quickly. You don't have to work at this speed, but I just want to make sure that you can see where I'm going with this, so I can take my hand away. There we go. So you should see that we've got this sort of pattern, and eventually we're going to leave just the sort of U. It's a U shape, of course, that's what I'm grasping for. It's like a horseshoe, isn't it, or U shape. So we're going to leave just the U shape showing through, because we're going to put a lot of black background in, and it'll give this real sort of drama and real kind of oh, it just looked really good. So, and then I think we can get some more circles. Are sort of like, are they pearls, are they bubbles, something like that. So I'm just going to put again a few of them coming down in scale sort of along the inside of this curve. So just a smallish one, and then getting slightly larger, and then the biggest one, and then getting smaller again, and maybe a tiny one just tucked in there, just sort of, you know, fit them in. So I think it's got a nice kind of like bubbly kind of feel. They do sort of feel like you know, I'm for blowing bubbles. So I just want to do a couple of bits here just so that this little area is sort of coming together. Obviously I think with this sort of piece here, then I would get another great big swooshing out spiral. So maybe here I'm just going to put a few more of the teardrop shapes following this line, just so that it's not too left out at the moment. And again, what you can also do is decide to sort of take some of this out with black pen so it becomes more of a background and it becomes darker, but we'll have a look at that in a minute. So maybe if I was going to take this line as a double line all the way down, so if I can just draw all the way down with this one. I know I'm disappearing off camera, but it doesn't really matter at the moment, but I can take that down into that spiral. And then, you know, that's just something we can work on. It's just so that we've got sort of like a lot of stuff going on here to really focus on. Okay, so I've got some, if we just go back to look at this section here, I've got my sort of basic idea. What I think I'd like to do is with these teardrop shapes, to make them, to give them even more of a kind of feathery kind of feel, I'm going to take a black line through the middle of each one, like a little, as if I am putting in the spine on a feather. So it's just going up the middle and stopping a little bit away from the top. So you just start at the very point of the teardrop shape and bring your line up through the middle roughly and stop. If it's not perfectly through the middle, again, it won't really matter, but just try and follow the shape and you don't have to go all the way to the end. If you leave the end so the line is stopping before it hits the end, that's a better kind of feather shape. So because feathers have that kind of, the spine goes up and there's like a fluffy bit coming out the top. and I can just bring a line up through them like that, and then same sort of thing, just starts to give us something that when we come to add a little bit of colour, it'll give us something to work with and to kind of give that. I just find it very satisfying, that sort of line. So again, just bring these down in the same way. And you can even do fancy things like adding a dot at the end of your line to kind of give it a bit more presence, or sort of turn it into like a sort of peacock eye kind of thing. That's another possibility, but we won't go there tonight. I'm just going to draw all of these ones in. And again, where you've got a big curl like this big curl one, follow the curl with the feather spine. So if I just do this one, come right round and do a lovely curl like that with it, so it's sort of part of the shape, it's echoing the shape that you've got going on. So let's just bring all these round in the same way. There we go, and bring those through. Lovely. So they're just starting to get a bit more 3D. I've just got the last ones to do up here, and you can see, I think, when you compare the plain ones to the ones with the lines drawn in, how effective that is of just adding a bit more form. And you're starting to see that thing of where I'm drawing the lines, because they're all coming from that same point, that little tiny point in the bottom of the teardrop shape. As I draw extra lines in, I've got more black lines heading into that sort of those central points, and that's starting to add shadow, isn't it? You can see how I haven't said let's add some tone or some shade into that centre point, but just by drawing those extra lines and bringing them all to that same point, I'm putting more black pen at that point on my drawing, and it's starting to give this impression of shadow along here, as if these are folding in to the design, and that's a fantastic thing to play with and something that's really useful to think about. So let's do my last few quill spines, feather spines. Just sort of bring that in, and that last one there. There we go. So that's, you can see how if I was doing the whole picture, I'd have done all of this all the way through here, and I'd be doing that on every one before I move on. But as I said, we won't have time to do all of that now. Then I've got this plain sort of snaky spiral that's going on in here. I think we need to do something in here to sort of liven it up a bit. So I'm going to put a crisscross pattern on it. So to do that, I'm going to start with a diagonal. I'm going to put a little bit of a curve in it, not maybe as much as the Tim Burton stripe. And I'm trying not to have it starting at the same point as the Tim Burton stripe. That is surprisingly difficult to move away from the stripe so you're not following it. If you do follow it, it doesn't really matter, but it's just weird how, you think it would be easy to avoid, and it's actually quite hard to avoid something. So I'm just bringing like a sort of chevron pattern round so that it's going that way, and I'm going to do something over the top so that it doesn't look too close to the Tim Burton stripe. It will start to look more different in a minute. So I've got those running all the way round that spiral, and then I'm going to do another one going in the other direction over the top, so like literally making like a sort of crisscross pattern, like a sort of basket work pattern, and that then hopefully will make it stand out away from the stripy one, and it won't look too similar. But you can see I want to try and get like them to cross each other, so we get like this sort of slightly woven or sort of basket work feel, and I'm slightly curving the line the other way. It's sort of like doing lots of kisses really in a row, kind of up and round, and just bring those around over the top, and it should hopefully stand out against the stripy one. But it's just another simple way of getting a different surface onto part of a pattern. There we go, so that's sort of taken that round. So now I've got two kind of patterns going on round there. I'm just having a momentary sip of water. So I can do something very similar on this other curl. I've got a sort of plain curl here again. Again, if I was doing a full drawing, there'd be all sorts of more of these feather spirals, sprouts coming up here in big bloofy colours. But I think with this one, in the way that we did these sort of, we've got these nice sort of half moons going here. So I think we're going to do some crisscrosses again, but I think we'll do them quite small and quite tight. So maybe tighter together diagonals going one way as we come up and round. And I'm sort of letting them, sort of imagining again that they've got a feathery kind of feel. So they're kind of growing up off the spine of the feather still. So you've got like a sort of nice diagonal. It's just a classic hatching pattern, really. And if you haven't heard that term, cross-hatching and hatching is where you use lines crossing each other to create tone in a pen drawing. I realise if you've never heard that phrase before, it make you think of birds hatching out of eggs, but I don't mean that kind of hatching. But just in case it's not a phrase that you've heard. So this is just hatching, where you go in one direction. And then when you go back the other way, going in the other direction, and you cross it, that becomes cross-hatching. Or if you wind it up, it becomes cross-hatching. Right, so I'm just coming down. That was a terrible dad joke, honestly. I'm just going to come down. And as again, you might want to find, as you come down into the smaller bit of the spiral, you probably find that your lines quite naturally want to sit closer together. So as they come down, then they become much closer together, and that gives you that extra bit of tone. So now that's the hatching bit done. So we're going to do the cross hatching, and that's just diagonals going in the other direction. So just sort of reorientate yourself, and then you'll see you get this sort of crisscross. It looks like lots of little diamonds, doesn't it, packed together, or a kind of check pattern. And it doesn't matter if it, again, as they come around the corner, it's going to distort. They're going to change shape. They're going to look more like diamonds and squares. That's fine. Just try and just keep them always going the other direction from the ones they're crossing, and something close to a pattern will happen. So we're just going to bring that over and round, just always making sure that the ones on top are crossing over the ones on the bottom, and that's when you get this sort of crossing feeling. So just be guided with what you've done before, and round it comes, and it's getting smaller and smaller again because it's kind of going down the end of the spiral. And just going to work out where to do it. There we go. As long as it's crossing some part of it, and as it comes into the end, of course, it's going to get really dark and almost kind of disappear. So now we've got the spiral sort of done. This one in here, I think this could probably do with something. Let's do another one of our sort of horseshoe. Then we decided that's going to be the horseshoe pattern. So on the lower one down here, I'm going to do another horseshoe. So again, it's just following into the space I've got with my outline for the horseshoe first. That's it, leaving a little bit of a gap so that what you want is those nice triangle shapes quite cleanly between them, because that's when it's going to really help make it work. So just these sort of nice triangles. And you can do them all sort of joined up, you know, as if you were going along doing lots of M's, really, or W's they become, I suppose, when they go around the corner. But you get into a nice sort of flow, like a bit of handwriting, kind of going bump round, bump round. And then, again, just follow the shape you've got. So as the shape gets smaller, your bumps get smaller until they disappear off into nothing. And we've got that extra layer going in, and then we go back and we're going to do the inside of each of those, and they you can't join them up, they've got to stay sort of separate, but eventually we're going to have to colour in between these, so that'll be when we use really fine pens for doing some of those tiny holes. There we go, and we're just going to come round and adding in the bottom of the horseshoe, so we have some horseshoe shapes. And again, if you don't feel like doing, you can leave them as petals. If you don't feel up to doing horseshoes, you can even do triple ones if you're feeling really adventurous. So it's completely up to you. We just want to have these curls just having a bit more thickness to them, a bit more stuff going on. When I finished this horseshoe round here, I'm going to have a momentary tea break. And then I'm going to show you how we're going to add some dark background into this, and how it's going to start making these front ones really pop out, and then we'll have a go with some colour to add the colour on as well, and it should make this really quite dramatic looking. So I'm just going to mute for 1 second to grab a mouthful of tea. And that was indeed very hot tea, so I possibly should have waited a bit longer for my tea moment. Right, so I'm gonna come in a bit closer again with the camera, if I can. I just need to tilt it up so see, because I want to show you how putting in the black background really starts to make the sort of pop. So there's two approaches to putting in a black background like this. You can either do all the tiny fiddly bits first and then go in with a bigger pen to sort of do the larger areas, or you can do it the other way around. You can do the bigger areas first and then go in and add the detail. I haven't decided yet which works best for me, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start with the larger areas and then we're going to go into the fine detail. Now again, you might want to slow down this bit, just watch this bit, because it's quite difficult to, if you're using a brush pen, it can be quite hard to follow what I'm doing and sort of use brush pen, because brush pens, as we spoke about previously, they are quite soft, and sometimes you can press too hard, the line can get quite thick. So it's one of the ones, if you can focus on it, then you can get quite a lot of even quite delicate work done, but you do have to be careful, because they tend to be that bit softer, they can very easily thicken up a line. So if you're not sure, what I tend to do when I'm doing this is to start off by kind of outlining the bits that I want to keep white, and then I know I can fill in kind of this section around here. So I'm thinking background, and then I can go in later and with the finer pen and tidy it all up so that it doesn't look messy. But I'm going to start by just sort of putting in this section here and just colouring that in. I want to go in around these circles too, but that might be a job for a finer pen. But you can sort of, roughly sort of, it's quite useful. You can go ahead and kind of blob in where you want to go dark. So these blobs are going to disappear into the background, but I'm just sort of putting them in to kind of remind myself that I want to colour in them. I've also got to colour into the middles of all those horseshoes and in between them as well. So you can see just how the shape will start to pop out. But I think it's probably time, it's one of these jobs where you're probably going to want to have two pens kind of to hand, because once I've done a bit of the brush pen, I can then go back and use I'm just using my 0.3, just like a colouring pen now, to come in and fine up that shape. So I'm going to go right between, until I've run out of white space, right between those feather sort of plumes in there, and just coming in around, and hopefully you're seeing straight away that by putting in that black background, the feathers are now really jumping out. They're really strong against that background. And the same with, if I come in and tidy up around the circle in there, that's now like a little highlight against that black background. And I can come in. Now obviously this is going to take a little bit of time to sort of go around and do all these and get all the little inners and outs done. So I'm going to sort of go in between doing this and then adding some colour, because it's not so it's a very dynamic effect, but it's not so dynamic watching me do it. So in those horseshoe bumps, look, I need to come up, but I can just come in, and can you see what I mean? If I colour inside all of them now, the kind of all the construction lines start to disappear into blackness, and they sort of start to look just like little tiny shapes all on their own. So people say, oh gosh, look how you very carefully drew all those tiny shapes and got them exactly the right size for your pattern. And you go, yes, I did. But then you just fill in between the sort of triangles, and that starts to give that a really lovely kind of, it's sort of like almost disappearing off into darkness kind of feel. So we'll come in along around these sort of circles. Again, just bringing your pen round and just eating away that white background and bringing the drama. And you can see how we've got that big horseshoe. Look, you can just come down into that shape straight away and into that shape. And it just, there's something so lovely about this sort of really dark background. And we're going to add some colours in a minute, so you can kind of see how the colours will really stand out against that dark background. So obviously I could probably be I would go back and make sure there's no little bits of white showing. And this is a really good if you need some real meditative, calming, just following, colouring in the shape kind of time. You know, if you want, it really helps if you're in need of something very straightforward and relaxing after a long day. Because you can just concentrate on colouring in all those little bits of white, and it's very satisfying once it's done. So you can see I've got that pattern sort of starting to swirl in again. I don't know if I can get even closer with the camera. It doesn't like going terribly close, but it doesn't like to stay in focus. But go on, you can do it. It's on a kind of flexible arm, which is not as flexible as the manufacturer would have you believe. Yeah, so you can see that's even a bit closer. And then, of course, we've got our sort of Tim Burton stripe thing going on here as well, haven't we? So every other one of these stripes needs to be in black. So this is why doing that stripe with a slight curve really helps to establish that shape, because it's not, although I'm doing it all in black, it's not going to completely disappear it. It's going to keep its identity as the sort of stripe, because we're going to use a little bit of shading on the remaining areas as well to kind of add that effect. But I'm going to bring those ones in darker, and I'm going to add a tiny bit of highlight. So on, like, when I get into the bigger sections, I might just leave a little bit of highlight in the middle of that black one, which we've done before, just to give that a bit of interest. But quite a small, not loads, just a tiny little, that might even be too much. I think just a little tiny dot of highlight, just to sort of bring that, carrying that round. And as you go round again, just a tiny little, if you do a little sort of oval just to isolate it first, and then colour in round. So that's just, and you still see that sort of stripy feel. It's still got that sort of nice curved quality to it. I'm just adjusting the camera again to see if I can get that into, it's really hard to go, I can't quite get close enough with this camera to show you the really fine detail, annoyingly, but as I said, that's because they're designed for making you look nice on Zoom calls, not for sort of artwork in the same sort of way. So I'm just bringing those shapes around. You can see, again, just into that horseshoe underneath there, and into that triangle in between, and just to bring that, just to keep pushing that darkness so that all of these sort of shapes disappear in and we get that really dark feel. I'm going to just take this area in here because I think I can do that quite quickly, and it'll just help to show you how this sort of black background works all over. So I would just continue doing, if you're painting along, drawing along, do your little, continue with your neat pattern and your little tiny pen, and I'm going to just whiz in this dark background really quickly with my brush pen to hopefully give you the feel of how it's going to work out, and continue that background, because as you can see, once you get that in, your eye starts to connect this background with that background, and you're starting to see it as very much a background and not just an isolated bit of colouring. So yeah, so I can do that. I can just take that, and I'm going to just, now there'd be more pattern along here than I've got because I've kind of like edited it down, but I'm just taking my brush pen around there just to sort of, again, bring that background through and up into the sort of shapes there. So hopefully starting to see how that's working and making it quite exciting and quite dramatic. And again, that last bit of snaky tail is going to disappear in there, and I can put in those inside my half horseshoes like that as I work my way around. And it is quite forgiving, this. If you accidentally over colour, take out something that you weren't supposed to in black, it usually works out fine. You can just sort of pretend it's fading in and fading out again, and I think it just adds to the interest sometimes. So I'm just going to very quickly, I'm not being as neat as in here as you might want to be, because I'm just really wanting to get this in so you can see what I'm doing. So again, round all those white shapes, those white circles. And this is not really being helped by the fact that for some unknown reason my eye has just started watering and I've got mascara in my eye. So now I'm having to do this with one eye closed. So I feel that, I should get points if I even get these close now, because I've now lost all my depth perception. But I will carry on. The show must go on. So yeah, I can just get these last bits in. Come here, that's better. I've managed to open my eye again now. Oh, mascara. I will eventually give up wearing it, I think, because it always makes my eyes run. It's just vanity. Right, so let's put those last few dots in. There we go. So again, I would probably spend a lot more time on this and be quite neat with my fine liner pens, but that should hopefully give you that kind of feel. And I hope you can see from that how those sort of horseshoe ideas work, how you see the pattern kind of working its way round, but it looks like a sort of skeletal pattern, like sort of halfway there, like it's not all there. And I think it works quite magically, but you still see the spiral, but it's sort of like only half there, which is great. Right. So let's have a look at how we can add some colour into this to kind of really start to work against that strong black background. So I'm going to start the colour on this bit. Obviously, eventually we'll do it all over. And all this space in between here, all of this will be black. With the crisscross pattern, I'd leave that and we'll just put some colour on that. We won't put black in there. But all the way around here, this is all going to be dark. So again, colour palette is completely up to you what you fancy. I think I would stick to something quite pastel-y and sort of light, because you've got this with the contrast of the black background. I think it's fun to play with very light, delicate colours on top. So where I've got my sort of feather shapes in here, similar to what we've done before, I would start off by putting, I'm using a pink here, I'm just putting an overall pink. I'm just leaving the very end of those shapes white, so we've got somewhere to go with the highlighting of it. And then I'm just going to start off by putting a sort of medium tone again over my sort of feather shape. I'm going to add some more detail to it as we go. And then again, thinking a little bit around sort of shading and tone and shadow. As they disappear into the points, the colour needs to get a little bit stronger and darker to kind of help with that feeling of it disappearing into space. So I've used a pink just on there. I'm going to come in with a lilac. It's always good to add shadow, and that I'm just blending that into the pointy section, as it were. So not all the way along, just leaving that, just taking into the disappears, leaving the top section quite pale, and then bringing that lilac-y colour into the sort of tails of the shapes. And hopefully you're seeing that's just starting to add to that three-dimensional feel, or the depth that we're getting as it disappears off into the darkness. And you might want to add like a little bit along one edge, as if these are sort of overlapping each other. They would sort of cast a shadow on the one below, maybe, sort of like that, sort of bringing those sort of tones in. So that's still doing it in a kind of pink colour, it's pink with a bit of purple. So let's go quite multicoloured with it. So for these sort of three on this side, I'm going to use an orange in the same kind of way. So I've missed a spine on this one, but never mind. So again, all but leaving a little bit of white at the end, but I'm just putting the orange because that's my mid-tone of whatever colours you want to use. I'm putting my orange in just along sort of about 3/4 of the length of the feather. This one, where it can you see it's sort of popping in, it's got quite an overlap, it's got a little nose sort of popping out, hasn't it? So I'm going to put the orange in still, but there'll be plenty of shadow on this one because it's kind of underneath. So with this one, I might take the orange all the way to the end of the shape so that it's sort of more shadow. Although the orange is a bright colour, having more orange on there gives it a slightly more shadowed feel. So it's just working those oranges in. And then again, I'm going to get a red pencil, red being the darker version of orange, and go in towards the tail of that shape with some red, so that it's starting to work with that, a feeling of them all disappearing into the sort of central point and the sort of shadow. So that one has red, and it's about halfway the red, so you've got the sort of half red there and sort of half red kind of there, and then we've got the area on this one. I'm going to so my computer's just telling me things. I'm going to put an extra bit of shadow in underneath that edge there. So we've got the white edge, the white area of that petal or feather on top is going to contrast really strongly with that dark shadow on there. So it's got that sort of much stronger quality, and that helps to give that sort of overlapping kind of feel going on with that one. So that's how I would do the kind of feathers, and you want to kind of get them overlapping as you go along. All these ones again, we might get a chance to do some more. With the circles, the key with the circles is going to be leaving that sort of white highlight moment on the circle, so it's not all just coloured in. So if you start off with I'm going to use a green, and I'm just sort of colouring around the edge of each circle and leaving a white sort of, can you just see like a little white dot in the middle? And if you think about drawing like a ring inside your white circle each time and leaving that dot of white in the middle, that starts to look like a highlight. I'm using again a mid-tone green because if I've got, what I'd like to do is go back and add a little bit of the darker blue so that around the very edge of that green, if there's space. It's sometimes quite hard when you've got a relatively small circle to do that. But yes, so I'm just drawing around the edge and then leaving that white space. And if you sort of like, you can even just do it just by having your pencil pushing quite hard around the edge and then softening it up so that it helps to blend those sort of colours through, and you just see that little sort of bit, it starts to give it that nice sort of highlight feel. So you can just soften the moment when it becomes white. It doesn't have to be a completely hard circle. So I can just bring again those up there, and again I'm going around again with the green, and I'll show you if I get a blue pencil, blue because it tends to be sort of a cooler tone and darker tone to the green, I can just put a little bit of darker blue just around the very edge, even sometimes just on the bottom edge, just to add a bit of extra shadow. It depends though, because sometimes the circles are so small you can't really fit that sort of colouring in. It's going to be a bit too complicated, but if you can, it just works quite well just to give them a real sort of sense of reality. I'm just going to tilt my camera again just to make sure we can see this. Then with our Tim Burton snaky kind of section, what really works with this is to not colour, you're really only going to colour on the white sections obviously, but not colour all of them. So if you just think maybe it is, I'm going to maybe it is like a black and white stripe, but what I want is a lightish blue. That's kind of turquoise, but that'll do for now. And just put a little stripe of that colour in one half of your white stripe, so it becomes like a bit of shadow. So just on one side of the white stripe, I'm just adding a patch of blue, and running that all the way down the shape. And you can see, hopefully, how that kind of adds to that 3D effect, because just by putting that bit of blue in, that starts to look like you've got shadow kind of coming round there. So it works really well. You don't have to put too much in, you can just do that. We've done similar things before, and again with this sort of, I've got a white stripe that we haven't got a lot of pattern on, and I can just make that look 3D again. Do you remember how I did this before, just by putting shading along one edge and leaving and then the other edge, and leaving a stripe all the way along the middle of that in white, so that it becomes a highlight, and as it goes into the base where it disappears in, then you can add some darkness. In fact, just to sort of add to that effect, once I've put again that overall pale middle tone in, I can come back with my darker pencil, and towards the end of that shape, as it disappears into that darker area, I can really darken it down with some blue, so that it sort of gives it, you can see how it's starting to look like it's coming out and curling round, and then I can come back to that top, that thin point there, and take that in to put more blue on that, and that starts to see how that's now kind of disappearing into that darkness in a very sort of dramatic way, which is great fun. Right, so then we've got some more feathers sort of in here. So let's look at these nice big feathers coming around here, because we've got lovely shapes here to kind of practice with our shading and toning. So let's do these ones in orange too. So let's look at this big one, because it was quite a large shape. So again, I'm going to start by filling in with some orange. Keep it light. If you're not sure how to begin, don't put too much pressure on the pencil, because you can always go darker. You can't really make it go lighter. So I'm just, with a medium or light pressure, just filling in that amount of orange all the way along the shape and tucking the tail in, sort of following that tail round. So you can see I've left the end quite white, and I've got sort of a light application of orange through that. Now with these ones, because they're quite stacked, aren't they? Almost as if they're layered on top of each other. So you would find that on this big one, this next one would cast a shadow onto this. So when I come to put the red on, I want to put more red all the way along that edge, because that will start to look like a piece of shadow, sort of coming into there. And then I take the tail end of it into the all red as well, because that's all disappearing down into the darkness. And because I've got room, and because you can see that sort of spine coming through there, I can always add a bit of shadow along that spine as well, and it will start to give it as if that's sort of curving down a bit towards into the spine too, and then a little bit of red along that edge as well, just to sort of add to that effect, and then sort of bring that round again. So I think because want to put the shadow onto this one, now that I can see that, I can expand my orange, or continue it along so that it's kind of coming up onto the head bit a bit more, because I want to put a bit more shadow on there. So that's what I'm saying, sort of take it slowly, go a bit at a time, because you can always make things a bit darker. And then I can come in with my red, which is my shadow colour on this one, and I can imagine that upper section is casting a shadow down here onto that. So that's sort of hopefully giving that a nice sort of 3D quality. And again, you can just blend your colours in together, work back over the top with the orange, and if you feel confident, you know that your orange is not ever going to be as dark as the red, so you can add a bit of extra orange, and then if you think, oh, my red shadow's gone a bit, I can add a bit more red just along that where I want to increase my shadow lines. So that's sort of that one there. So then we sort of move back one, and again, same sort of procedure. Start with a light application of orange, leaving the end of it white, and then working back towards where the point disappears in. So moving that round. There we go. And then again, because this one would be overlapping, so this top edge here, I put a bit more orange in, because I can see now the kind of pattern of shadow that I want happening in here. And then I can go back with my red and add a darker tone underneath that one on top. And if you sort of work from the bottom upwards, it's much easier to imagine where the shadow should come somehow, because you can always see the one on top then, and see that you've got to remember that that's going to be casting a shadow down. And I might see a little bit of shadow along the spine, but it's basically going to be the same treatment all the way along and going down. And then if you want to, if you wanted to make this disappearing point even more dramatic, you could then get a cooler colour. Maybe, I think I would go for a purple. I'm just trying to see if I can see a darker purple than one I've got in my pencil box. But you know what it is. The moment I go down here for a pencil, they all hide, sniggering. But so I'm just going to use the purple I've got. But I can go over that end with a cool colour on a hot colour, and that will add some extra drama and some extra shadow. So that as it disappears into that spine, we get extra darkness coming in there. You can see the way that's sort of sucking, hopefully sort of like looks like it's sort of turning away and getting darker. There we go. And then again, so I can come back, and I'm just going to work my way up with orange, remembering where my shadow comes. And I think if you start with the larger pieces, so you can work out on each of these feathers where the orange should come, and then it's harder to kind of see it to begin with when it's the smaller pieces, but once you've got the idea from that, you can then just kind of put all your orange tone in and work through the shape. So of course where it comes here, they're sort of changing direction, aren't they? So the same thing will apply, but you're just going to be putting your shadow on a slightly different side, because as it turns around it will be casting a shadow down onto these ones. So now this one is going to be quite dark compared to maybe some of the other ones on top. In the way that we made that one darker, this one's going to be darker. So coming round there like that, and then I can go back. That's all just the orange, and then I can come with my red pencil, and there's definitely going to be shadow here because there's an overlap there. That's it, and then here there'll be a little bit of shadow doing that and coming round, and then this one I think is going to be dark. And as I always say, if you're not sure about something, do the bits where you know they're definitely one way or another, because then you can always come back and have a look, and you might be able to work out where to go next if you're not sure. This one is sort of on top really, so I'm going to keep that quite this one here. It's not going to have too much red on it because it's sort of on top, so it's going to stay more orangey. And then that sort of overlap onto there and onto there maybe as well. I think I can bring that shadow look down onto the ends a bit too, to kind of enhance that curved kind of feel. But hopefully you're seeing now, you get this lovely sort of soft pastel colour against this really strong black background, and you get quite a lot of drama through that. It looks really quite dramatic. And I think I'm going to just finish those green circles because I feel that they're looking quite odd being white. I think because particularly as they go into getting smaller, they should be getting darker, shouldn't they, as they disappear off into it. So let's bring, again, let's go round and round, and just leaving that little white highlight. And these smaller ones, as they're getting into darkness, there's going to be no highlight on them at all. They're just going to be green, and they're going to be disappearing off. And in fact, like the very small ones at the back here, I'm going to put a bit of blue over the top as well, so they become really dark, and they're sort of disappearing into that sort of shadow in there. So I'm hoping that sort of really come to life now. You can really see how these are kind of all working together. With these ones up here, let's do a few of these because the light on those is going to be slightly different. I'm going to change colour. Let me think. I'm going to do these in, so let's do shades of blue on this one so that it stands out from the orange and you can see what I'm doing. Because if you imagine, usually our light source is coming down from above, so it means that again these top ends here are going to be pale, so we're going to put our mid-tones going to come in underneath, leaving that little area of white at the top. So I know I can start off with just my mid-tone, not too hard, not too strong, but just to get some colour on there. Those end bits up there are definitely going to be white in comparison. Bringing them round again. And I mean, of course, you can turn your pattern from different angles. Your light source might be from a different angle than mine. You know, it's just something to, you've got to start somewhere. So we'll just kind of imagine that we've got a light source from above at the top of the drawing. I mean, so it doesn't really matter with any angle you want, really, as it's a doodle. And then again, these ones, just leaving those sort of top bits whites for now. And this one is going to have quite a lot of shadow on it again because all those ones on are kind of above it, aren't they? So we can get quite a lot of turquoise tone on that. Okay, so that's just got my turquoise tone on that. And then I'm going to use, I think probably a bit of blue to be the extra strong shadow. So there's going to be some shadow under there and the bottom end of it where they're disappearing in to that middle spine, and same under here, and just the bottom half of each of these pulling round into that, starting to give those a kind of overlapping feel. Now with these I might be tempted to actually get to make them quite shadowed and have the top half quite white in comparison, because I feel that they're kind of, you know, this is like the underside and they're, you know, but you know, that's getting quite esoteric. So however you want to do it will probably work. But I think I definitely want to get some nice blue tones into these, and definitely this one on the end where it's kind of falling under, that needs to go quite bluish, I think, just to be just to really push it into the shadows and have it falling into a bit of shade. There we go. And we can work in a bit more blue tone in some of these, and then I might go back and then sort of again go back with my turquoise and maybe bring some more turquoise into this white area. So there's not so much white on these, just a little tiny bit at the top, and we can overlap, we can blend. Again, just working them all together, and see I can leave just a little tiny bit of white at the top and get lots of nice luscious blue tones into that. And then it might be a little bit hard to see that white tone at the moment, but if I just finish a bit of colouring, then I'm going to come in with my black brush pen and just colour in along there, and then we'll start to see how much that stands out and how strong it is. So if I just come in, and again I'm working relatively quickly, but I'm just going to line round those shapes. Here we go, whizzing along, being super fast because I just want to show you how impactful this is, and then coming round into that spiral. That's it, and then just going to get rid of those little triangles, and you can see straight away how that's really starting to make this blue bit of pattern now as strong and bold. And again you can see how the reason it looks, I think the camera looks a bit white, and that's because this ink is still wet, and it's just the light is just catching on the wetness of the ink. It will dry off very soon because the brush pen ink is more liquid than the fine liner, comes out wetter. So let's just take all the way around these circles. If you squiddle one up, look like that, I can just tidy it up and pretend that's what we want. And you can see how once I start getting the black in here, it starts to link through to the black background here, and your eye kind of connects the two, so you can kind of get the feeling of where they're all kind of merging down into the background and standing out against them. Now obviously I would probably, for choice, do all of my pattern across the whole page, get all of my spirals worked out, so that I can then know that I'm definitely putting into blackness the pieces that I want to go into blackness. But this bit here, at least I can be very certain, I am certain that I want all this to be into the background, so that's fine. But I think I'd want to get all of the plumes and the other spirals into the rest of the picture before I do everything black, because I can see I've got to go in between all these sort of horseshoes again, just sort of like moving them in between. And I'm probably messing some of them up because I'm being a bit speedy, but I just want to try and give you some of the overall kind of effect of how this is going to look. And it's one of these ones that, if you've got the time to do the whole sheet of it, it just looks so effective and so glam. There is something very glam about it. I think it's lovely. So I can just bring those sort of horseshoes in. But hopefully you're seeing, look how much these pop out now. And you can suddenly see that white highlight really strongly on it. And there's this lovely feeling of when they disappear into these dark colours, you've just got this sense of them falling into sort of dark space, which is really appealing. And just sort of I should be using my fine liners, but I'm just holding my breath and hoping I can get my brush pen to behave, and just putting those last little horseshoe. I was going to say shoehorn. If I said shoehorn instead of horseshoe, I mean horseshoe. Little horseshoe details. Look, I can just about do it. if I hold my breath when I'm doing it. Just to bring us up. There we are. So you can see that sort of, and again we've got that sort of nice disappearing pattern kind of coming through with those horseshoe shapes. Oh dear, horseshoe shapes. I would probably just colour them in a colour that you like for your design. I wouldn't worry too much about, because they're quite spindly. You're not going to see a lot of light and reflection on them. So I think you can let yourself off and just colour them. Let's just colour them a nice pink while we're here. You could, if you wanted to, well that's red, all right, they're going to be red. As they disappear down again into the small ones at the very end, you could make those slightly darker in tone and put a bit of extra oomph into them. So again, they'd sort of disappear into the darkness of the pattern. But I'm just going to quickly whiz along and make these all the way red all the way along, so we can kind of get a bit of colour on them. And I think you want a contrast so that they're sort of in contrasting stripes maybe too. So I've got green here, I've got blue here, haven't I? So I think a red is quite valid to kind of help them stand out. But round they go, and you can just put a little whiz of colour. The nice thing about it, because you've got the black background, you're not really going to see red pen, so you don't have to be, you can be quite quick with them, because you know, if you do slightly go over the lines, it won't show on the black background. So, you know, and conversely, if you were doing this before you put the background in, you could always tidy them up with a bit of pen if you get a bit messy and go on the background. So it's quite good, this, it can go quite quickly. So that's got those sort of red shapes in there. With this, let's have a look at this crisscross bit before we run out of too much time. So I'll just stretch my camera up. So where you've got this sort of crisscross, if you want to be incredibly patient, and I probably am not this patient, you could colour the individual squares in. I probably wouldn't. What I would do is to, I think I'm going to go for a pink tone again, because I think I want a red tone to balance against that blue feathers. I would treat it as if it's just like the long smooth one that we did, and just colour over the top really, and just see again probably that bottom edge there where it's curling round, needing a bit of shadow. Imagine that it's basically white, but I'm just want to add a little bit of tone in to make it do something a bit different and stand out from the background. And just again where it disappears down into the root of the pattern, I would come in with some slightly deeper tone in there just to help that disappearing effect. We've got another Tim Burton stripy candy stripy one up here, haven't we? So again, that's going to be, you could do that. You don't have to do it black if you don't want to. We could do alternate colours, so you could do like a green and a red stripe or something. I think if you're going to do that, again, bear in mind the effect we got on here with having the half bit of shadow. So I would be quite tempted to continue that idea. So instead of doing, if I'm doing green stripes, I would certainly do a darker green bit, then a pale bit, then a darker bit. So I'm pressing hard on that edge, then releasing the pressure, being very light with it, and then pressing hard again. So I'm not leaving a completely white space, but I'm just using my tones to give that highlight feel. So pressing there because I want shadow, releasing the pressure, being quite light, and then gradually more pressure on the other side. So that gives me almost like that kind of highlight feel. So I can continue that across. So shadow into highlight, back into shadow across each of these. And you can see that's helping that sort of 3D effect. I think you can just about see that. Again, annoyingly, it's clearer from my side than it is to yours, but I will add a scan into the end of the video so you can see, or a photograph at least, so you can kind of see the detail of it. So that's coming down. So coming down into this sort of bit here, and then lighter bit, and then heavier bit, darker bit, lighter bit, darker bit. And I think when you get round to the very end, I think we can just colour them in green, because then again they're sort of disappearing round. And then you choose your contrasting colour. You could choose a blue, so it's quite a similar tone, or you could, I'm going to choose, let's do full opposite colours and do red on this one, and do exactly the same thing. So Here where they're tiny, you're just going to see them as red, and then when you can, heavy red, light red, heavy red. So the same sort of thing. Continue your shading across, so you get a bit of shadow, bit of highlight, bit of shadow. Again, there you go. I mean, it looks quite Christmassy, doesn't it? It's like a sort of Christmas cane or Christmas decoration. It's quite a good seasonal kind of feel. Very unseasonal because it's August, but you know, when we're recording this, but again, just a heavy pressure, then light pressure, then heavy pressure, and that starts continuing that feeling of the sort of curved surface going around the whole of the shape. And I only ever get to do like a little part of my design, but I can see this. Imagine how this could spread across the whole page, and you could theme it to, I'm trying not to mask and finding that very difficult. You could certainly theme this, couldn't you, even though it's an abstract, to certain times of the year. You know, you could do a pattern like this all in shades of purple, orange and black, and somehow that would look like Halloween. Or you could do, again, you could do all the Christmas colours were basically reds, green and gold, and it would look like Christmas even though it was an abstract. And I think that's a nice thing about colour, how it brings with it so many kind of associations and sort of feelings like that. And then let's do some red diamantes or, you know, pearls in here. So again, just start lightly going around the edge of the circle, really lessen the pressure. So you just go very, very light pressure and then no pressure at all to give you that kind of white highlight. And then you can go back and add some darkness into more pressure kind of around it. Just maybe if you do like a sort of half, like a moon shape of shadow, that sort of again really helps to give that a nice, as if it's like a sort of pearl gleaming out in the darkness. And again, when they get down here, you can do them very dark and not really worry too much about the highlight because they're kind of vanishing in to that background. So just a couple more. This top bit here is starting to look really Christmassy. I just realised with the red baubles and everything, it looks really Christmassy. How bizarre, but there we go. I need to get some other colours into that, or it's going to look like Christmas. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, but there we go. So, and then I can add a bit of, it's if I want to get, if I use it, I want to get a real strong shadow onto that red. If I now come back with a blue pencil, I can just work over the top of my red, and that really looks like strong sort of shadow on that shape, and it just helps to cool it right down and to blend it into the background. And there we go. And then so we can see how we're getting this really nice dramatic background and these sort of pieces are sort of coming out of it. And one final thing you can do if you really want to increase the sort of the drama of your piece overall is you can add some extra shadow. So with your black pen, so where these shapes come down, you can just add a little bit of extra black into the points and start to really make them vanish into that dark space. If you want to try that, you can kind of add some extra shadow in and really push those moments where they kind of go into the centre and add that sort of black hole feel. But just sort of bring those round and maybe darken up some of the lines. But all of that is something you would do towards the end to add some extra tone in if that's what you feel like doing. I think ideally I would now, even if you've got this far in here, I would get all of the rest of your swirls in and your feather spirals and then kind of bring the background in so you can then see how your piece can develop from there. So there we go. This is the start of a very flamboyant and very theatrical, explosive doodle for this evening. And I hope you have lots of fun finishing that one off.